Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for our weekly track roundup where I go over what I felt were the best and the worst tracks of the week. No lighting. This is a special after dark edition of the weekly track roundup where we get a little crazy, a little sexy, a little nocturnal. Of course, before we get into all the tracks, I have to mention down there in the description box are our Amazon Associate and Turntable Lab links. If you live in the US, if you live in Japan, if you live in mainland Europe, if you live in Canada, you can, if you live in the UK as well, you can hit up the link down there in the description box. It'll send you over to Amazon if you were going to do some shopping, especially some holiday shopping. We get kickback from whatever you're going to buy off Amazon. And yeah. That's all there is to it. It's easy to use. You use it to buy some stuff you were going to buy anyway. And the good people over at Turntable Lab, like I said, we have a similar thing going on with them. If you click on the link down below, you are going to be sent to a page where you can pick up some colorful pressings of vinyl records that I've reviewed on the channel, as well as equipment like speakers and turntables for the budding record collector in your life or yourself. Treat yourself. And let's get right into the worst tracks of the week, shall we? Only a few tracks, in my opinion. Only a few tracks landed as worst this week. Kicking it off first with the new U2 single, American Soul. I can't even say I'm disappointed in this track because I didn't expect much from this track to begin with because I haven't really dug any of the music from U2's forthcoming album so far. But what sort of broke my heart about this particular track is that the vocal on this track is the exact vocal that lands on that Kendrick Lamar XXX song from his latest record, D.R.A.M. So basically that feature, that U2 feature, was just a sample from this forthcoming album. And I'm sitting here wondering, how exactly was this discussion had and how did it go about? Like, did you purposefully seek out U2, wanting them to be on your record, and then they just sent you a track or like a vocal that you could sample? Or did U2 approach you wanting to be on your new record? Did they send you an advance copy of the album and you just liked one particular vocal off of it? It just seems like, I don't know, a really weird, futuristic way of pre-promoting an album because the feature was merely just a sample from U2's forthcoming album. And now that I've heard that XXX track so many times, and it is one of my favorite tracks off of D.R.A.M., at least a few bits off of it, now that I've kind of had that Bono vocal contextualized in that song in my head, it sounds really silly and out of place on this particular track, even after multiple listens, though I have to say that's not even the worst part of the cut. Really, it's the kind of, I don't know, uppity chorus on the cut that just seems like a little too giddy considering the tone of Bono's voice on that particular lyric about America. Yeah, I'm not feeling this cut at all, I have to say. And I guess I'm not looking forward too much to this forthcoming U2 album. Next on the worst section has to be the new G-Eazy song featuring Zoe Nash, The Beautiful and the Damned. This track is painfully corny. I could barely get past Miss Nash's opening vocal on this thing. Like, this track is pretty much everything cliched and awful and terrible about some of Eminem's like most mainstream singles in the 2000s, like condensed and boiled down to the most potent concentration. The overblown production, the corny and cringy rap verses, and the barely tolerable guest singer who is just trying way too hard to sell the track. Like, nobody sings like this. Like, nobody legitimately... It's the singing, the guest singing on this track is pretty much the musical equivalent to overacting, I guess I would say. And I'm just going to leave it at that. The track generally just grosses me out, but most G-Eazy does, so no surprises there. Let's get into the cuts that I thought were meh. Wasn't crazy about them. Didn't think they were terrible either, but certainly still thought they were worth mentioning and shouting out and pointing in your general direction. First off, Screaming Females, aka Screamales, have a new song out titled Deeply, new album on the way. Wasn't too crazy about this new track over here. Sounds like the most low-key of all of the singles they have dropped so far. However, I still am enjoying the fact that it seems like the band is definitely changing pace, trying to become more versatile, trying to become more dynamic, and this could easily become a song that grows on me with more listens. It's just not really that effective as a single. Doesn't really get my mouth watering or anything like that, but I do like the fun painting concept of the lyric video. If you guys do pop into the description box and check this track out, as well as all the other tracks, we always link them down there in the description box, if you didn't know by now. Next, the new Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds cut, which I've heard has scissors on it. Or probably not, or yeah, I guess there was a recent live performance with Noel and the band, and somebody was playing scissors on the song, which hilariously led to Liam encouraging somebody to peel potatoes during one of his live performances. So somebody was literally in the crowd, like playing the potato peeler during one of his live performances. I would be surprised if this upcoming Noel record is better than the Liam album. The Liam album was pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good effort from him. The best effort from him musically post-Oasis, in my opinion. But this new Noel Gallagher track, It's a Beautiful World, certainly a lot better, more superior, more dynamic, and not quite as overblown and overproduced and claustrophobic as the last single to come out from the band. It's very spacey, it's very groovy, it's got a nice blissful psychedelic vibe. And that's the thing, the last track kind of had a bit of a faux psychedelia thing to it that kind of turned me off, like a neo-psych sound that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. This track is much more pleasant texturally, very kaleidoscopic, very pretty. And moving on from there, the new D.R.A.M and Playboi Carti track, Crumbs. I kind of went into this track expecting big things, and I feel like I didn't get it personally. There have been a few D.R.A.M tracks, singles, as of late that were kind of growers. Maybe this song will grow on me. However, I'm not really sort of seeing that to be the case. Case in point being that Playboi Carti, for the most part, only has ad-libs to add to the track. When his verse eventually comes in, he's totally boring. I feel like this is just the exact wrong way to utilize Playboi Carti. I mean, certainly his ad-libs are part of what makes him appealing, but to kind of just pepper them all over the entire track, even over some of the parts where you're going toward D.R.A.M or you're in the midst of the D.R.A.M performance, is a little distracting and doesn't really aid the song at all. D.R.A.M on the cut is very expressive, very fine, entertaining as usual, but the hook on this thing is like really underwritten. There's not really anything all that memorable about this chorus. It's cool that these two landed on this track and collaborated in such a big way, but I feel like this was the exact wrong way to utilize Playboi Carti. And D.R.A.M, again, while he was fine, the hook definitely needed some retooling, in my opinion. It was not as explosive or as catchy or as exciting as that of some of his recent material, and especially his debut album. Diplomats have a new track out titled Once Upon a Time. If you are a fan of Dipset, you're going to like this cut. You know, chopped up soul, banging beats. Pretty much everybody does their thing. It sounds like a friggin' Diplomats track from like 12 years ago. It's not bad. It's not amazing either. They just kind of come back with their trademark sound. They do their thing, and it's fine. It's fine. Not a bad cut at all. Not a bad cut. Not disappointed at all. Considering recent solo, or not rather recent feature stuff I've heard from these guys, I think it could have been much rougher, but in fact it ended up good. Moving on from there, the new Björk single, unfortunately, was not really that into the new Björk single, the track titled Blissing Me. I gave the track multiple listens, anticipated that it would grow on me, that it would sort of blow me away, given that it was a little more hard-hitting than The Gate, which I did enjoy despite how just kind of vast and spacey and formless the track was. This new cut, like I said, more straightforward, more direct. However, instrumentally, it just to me kind of seemed like a weird middle ground between Vespertine and Vulnicura. So we're very much kind of in that same wispy, very beat heavy and very string heavy sound palette. Björk's vocal melody gets really stale really fast. Like, she does not progress it all that much over the course of the track, in my opinion. And on top of it, the lyrics are, I guess, what you could have expected given how Björk teased the album, calling it her Tinder record, calling it a record that was kind of like, you know, her crush record, her dating record, her love song record, a record where she's essentially kind of transcendently, blissfully in love with a certain person or infatuated with a certain person. She's literally talking about sending MP3s to this person who she has a crush on and texting back and forth. And I don't know. Not that Björk's music hasn't come from a very personal and a very down-to-earth place in the past. I mean, some of my favorite cuts off of her early work, like Debut and Post, deal in very reality-based concepts. However, it just kind of seems like really vapid and really cheap and just really average for her to be describing this particular situation in the way that she does. Like, it doesn't seem very evocative of anything, and it certainly isn't worthy of the otherworldly vibe that comes along with the instrumentation on this track, or much of Björk's work as of late. It's definitely not taking me off into another galaxy like some of the best material on Biophilia does, which is certainly the intention of that record, given just how, I guess, conceptual and just how not of this world that album is. However, this cut over here just felt like, I don't know, just felt like I was listening to a horny millennial write the lyrics to a Björk song, and it was just a little off-putting. Maybe it'll end up growing on me a little bit more when I listen to it in the context of the album, and maybe am hit with more tracks that kind of back up this same theme, and then maybe it'll make more sense. But as of right now, I'm kind of mild on the track. You know, there are elements of the instrumental and her vocal performance that I like, but the substance of the song and the structure of the song, I'm kind of cold on, to be fair. Moving on from there, 50 Cent has a new single out. The single is titled Still Think I'm Nothing, featuring Jeremih. Certainly an interesting single title. He essentially is challenging people on this track with a message, challenging people to, I guess, kind of call him out or write him off for not being as interesting as he used to be, not being on top like he used to be. And while it's not really anything entirely new from 50, if you're familiar with any of his old stuff, it does sound like 50 Cent hungry again. Like, certainly the flow is indicative of that. He's kind of aggressive on this track, much more aggressive than he was on any number of cuts from his last album, Tape, whatever. I've already forgot about it. I've already erased it from my brain. It was that friggin' boring. This, however, did kind of pique my interest. 50 Cent fans should certainly take notice to this single over here. And let's get into the tracks that I thought were the best of the week. The best tracks of the week. First off, shout out to the band Tribulation. The Lament is the new single from the upcoming record that the band has coming out very soon. This band, if you didn't already know, is kind of this gothic, blackened metal band that has elements of just very strong balladry and melody and songwriting to their metal tunes. Sort of on par with a band like Ghost, but not quite like a band like Ghost. Like, they have their own style, they have their own vibe, they have their own aesthetic, but they're very much akin to Ghost in that they just have this strong sense of balladry and songwriting in a lot of what they do. And this new tune of theirs, The Lament, is one of the catchiest I've heard from them in a while. Love the chord progression, love the lead vocals, love how eerie and gorgeous some of the melodies are. I love the dark kind of gothic vibes on this thing. You could light your fucking candelabra to this shit. So give this track a listen. Thought it was great. Liking this new Chris Stapleton track, surprisingly. I've always thought Chris was a little too mild for me personally. I feel like he gets a lot of credit for being a rootsier and more authentic country artist, being a country artist who's a little bit more low down and dirty, a little bit more outlaw-ish, but I feel like that's only the case because mainstream country, the CMT brand of country that we see today, is so freaking vanilla that somebody like Stapleton can come in and it's like, whoa, this guy's like a breath of fresh air. And certainly he is that in a sense. He's no Sturgill Simpson, in my opinion. However, this new track over here certainly has me warming up to him a little bit. This new cut is Trying to Untangle My Mind, which is a very smart, very witty, very well written lyrically little track where he's kind of going over basically what's ailing him emotionally, what's ailing him mentally, and the stuff that he puts himself through to try to get to a place in his mind where he finds peace, finds calm. And of course, you know, being a country artist, being a purveyor of sorrow in a sense, you know, he has his troubles and he has his issues with getting to that place. And the chord progression is solid. Vocal melody is solid too. Overall, it's a good tune. And looking forward to this follow-up Chris Stapleton is going to deliver very soon. Over here, we essentially have two tracks that I wanted to feature, which both come from the Paul Institute. One big hyped to do this week has been the fact that Jai Paul essentially is back with his brother, and they have announced the start of this Paul Institute thing, which is not just like a label where they'll be releasing music, but it's literally a friggin' institute. It's literally a place where it seems like Jai and his brother are going to do what they can to work with artists, bring artists in, foster talent. I imagine they're going to put this record label or whatever to good use and then have people on the label and sell tracks and print records or whatever. So it seems like they're doing a really interesting little in-house thing here. And the way that they have kind of announced or teased toward this is that they've released two singles here, one from Fabiana Palladino and one from Ruthven. And the two tracks respectively are titled Evil and Mystery. And even though we're hearing two very different artists here who have different styles, both of them, because they feature production from Paul, it seems like it's almost like they're the same artist, or both of them could be on a Paul record as like vocal features or something. Like the production has a very kind of cold, frigid, a little eerie, a little nostalgic 80s vibe to it. Fabiana more of an 80s synth pop vibe, whereas Ruthven more of like an 80s synth funk vibe. Even though it is like different musical styles, there are some very clear like sonic similarities between the production choices, between some of the synth patches and stuff. So it's not like these two songs are completely disconnected or anything like that. So what a lot of people are hyping here is essentially that we're kind of hearing new Jai Paul in a way, but not truly. I personally am not really wondering or worried about whether or not we're going to hear more from him in the future. Not that I don't think he can't write a great record, but I feel like at this point, if he really wanted to come out with that new album, like he would have by now. I don't know what's keeping him from doing it. I really do not know what's keeping him from doing it. Everybody's waiting with bated breath, and maybe somehow this will be a tease toward doing that. But if he wanted to do it, he would have done it by now. However, I do enjoy these two new tracks. I think they're great tracks. I think there is kind of a weird, minimal, sort of odd, intentionally awkward, strange vibe to both cuts that I really like. And both of the tunes, I think, are really catchy at their core as well. I especially enjoy the lyrics on the mystery track from Fabiana. Both beautiful tracks, both weird 80s vibes to them, both off of the Paul Institute label, both connected to Jai Paul. So make sure you check these tracks out. I think they're good cuts, and it does sort of make me excited to see Paul potentially fostering talent with other artists if we're going to continue to get music that's this interesting. Moving on from there, Tame Impala has a new like B-sides and remixes EP out. A lot of people asking me if I am going to review it. No plans to review it, honestly, given that it's just labeled as B-sides and all that stuff. I do like Currents, though. However, the track that I do want to point out here is this song over here titled List of People to Try and Forget About. It is a very enjoyable song. It's not the most solid melody that you've heard from Tame Impala. But it does feel like one of the more rock-oriented tracks that could have landed on Currents, or rather just kind of came from the Currents sessions. And it does have an interesting little multifaceted structure to it, which does make the progression of the song really interesting. Listen, none of the material on this EP is awful, which is why I'm kind of mentioning it here. This is in the best track section, and I'm kind of reminding you guys not to miss out on this EP if you're not aware of it yet. But to me, it's just kind of a handful of cuts, couple remixes, not a whole lot to say. Just make sure you get your ears on this thing if you loved Currents and you're a big Tame Impala fan. That's all I got to say. Definitely digging a little bit of the material myself, but there's not a whole lot to say. And finally, I got to give a shout out to Health and apparently experimental music producer NOLIFE, coming together on this new single over here, totally out of the blue, Hard to Be a God. And really kind of liking how heavy and noisy and strange and almost kind of like industrial this new song is. I feel like some of the best elements of Health's music kind of marry with NOLIFE's production in a really interesting way. And hopefully this is not the first time we hear from both of these guys, because this is one of the darkest and strangest songs that, in my opinion, Health has released in a while. Certainly more interesting than quite a few cuts off of their last full-length album. And that's all I got to say, guys. You know, if you're into some weird, noisy electronic music, noise music, sort of abstract, I don't even know what you would call some of Health's music. It's certainly not pop music, but experimental electronic music that has pop influences and undertones, but also punk in undertones and sort of noise rock undertones, but like also coming from a different dimension. But shout out to Health for coming out with this single. I think it's one of the best I've heard this week. And those are the best and the meh and the worst tracks of the week. Again, make sure to hit up our Turntable Lab and Amazon Associates links. And that has been the weekly track roundup. Thank you for watching. You're the best. I will catch you guys in the next one. Over here next to my head is something you can probably click on, like the link to subscribe to the channel. And that's it. Love you, love you, love you. Forever.